talking about the different zone types in SketchUp, the materials and workflows to get audience zones, boundary zones, and venue geometry into SketchUp with our GLTF workflow. So this isn't going to be comprehensive to systems design. This is going to be very basic just to show the different file types and what they do, and the different material types and how they work with the importer. So in doing so, I'm just going to create one geometry here, and I'm actually going to make this into 3 different geometries just by double clicking it and hold the M key. And as I've dragged this over, I'm going to go and hit the Option key, which will copy it. And I'm going to do that one more time, click and drag, Option, copy it here. They're all on the same plane. So now I'm going to make this one an audience zone, this one a boundary zone, and this one I'm going to leave as a venue geometry. Before we come in and shade these with the HOLOPLOT materials that you can find on our website, our documentation, you're going to want to make each zone face its own component. So I can do that by right-clicking a selected object, which is double-clicking it so you can see the edges as well. And I can go to Make Component, or I can do Command or Control Shift G, and we can call this Audience Zone 1. The naming does not matter. Here I'm going to double-click this zone and call and component Boundary Zone 1. And this one I'm going to leave as is. So now that I've got these made into components, I'm going to come here, select this component, select my material, and call that one now is an audience zone. This one I'm going to select it, get that gray, and call that a boundary zone. And again, I'm going to leave this one alone. But just for example, I could come in and color it this magenta. And because this magenta has no naming convention to the material, as you see, the green and the gray actually are defined by this naming convention, which is what works in the GLTF export along with making them components. But this one has, this is not a material with a specific name to it. All this is kind of random, so this doesn't really matter. Now that I've got these prepared, I'm going to come up here to the extensions warehouse, the extensions manager, go to the GLTF export, and I'm just going to call this example, GLTF, save it to the desktop. Now I've got an open plan. This is a blank plan file. There's nothing in here. If I come to import GLTF, load the example, you'll see I have those 3 different zone types. And I have audience zone 1, boundary zone 1, and this geometry here is our venue geometry, which is not displayed in the zones. You see I can hide these 2, and this one I can't interact with. That's how I know it is venue geometry. These 2 zones I can interchange with their type. And the reason for these 2 types currently is that boundary zones can cast shadows for simulation, audience zones cannot. They can both be used in creating coverage beams. I'm going to swap this back here and show you some of the simulation results. Let's just make a 1x1 cabinet here. And we'll go ahead and point it this way. Move it up, well, like 2.5, somewhere in that range. That's fine. Let's go 2 for, whoa. There, -5, so that kind of moves it back. And let's move it up a little bit. Let's go 5, just so that I can now create a parametric beam for making this example. Let's go down -20 or so. So now our parametric beam would be hitting all 3 of these all 3 of these geometries. Again, remember that this venue geometry is not going to receive simulation results, only the boundary and audience zone will, and you can see that if I come to the simulation tab and hit simulate. And so these 2 zones are receiving simulation from our coverage beam, and if I have acoustic shadowing on, right now you're not going to see anything happen, but if I take this zone and I, let's say, raise it up a meter, and bring it, let's say right there. It should be partially floating above here. And now you can see the acoustic shadowing caused by this boundary zone. Now, if I did the same thing with, let me just swap those out. Now this audience zone is on top. See, that's not doing anything with the shadowing because audience zones do not cause acoustic shadows when acoustic shadowing is enabled. So I hope that gives a brief explanation between the two different zone types and how to prepare them for use in Plan.